never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice.
So as I was saying, the most important thing to do is to pressure your friends to do drugs so that they think they're cool.
That's right. Yeah. Peer pressure, as it turns out, is good and healthy. And if all of your friends jump off a cliff, yeah, you should too. What do you mean, Mom? Yeah, of course I'd jump off a cliff too. All my friends are doing it. What a ridiculous question.
That's the only reason I started playing role-playing games is I thought it would, my friends would think I was cool. Honest to gods, I am not lying.
That's funny. Hello, everyone. This is Dungeon Master of None.
I'm Dungeon Master Matt.
I'm Dungeon Master Rob, and we are your cursed hosts, your guides to all things that are cool, which includes, first and foremost, role-playing games. The coolest thing that you can do, because it is still very difficult to monetize them, and so they have not been made into the same awful cultural pablum that everything else is these days. Enjoy it while it lasts, folks, because the end is nigh.
Well, on that cheery note,
D&D NFTs are coming.
No, Dragonlance is coming.
Dragonlance is coming. That's right. We have Dragonlance news, or Dragonlance strong hints, I guess.
There's an Unearthed Arcana. So we haven't covered Dragonlance yet. It is along with Birthright, I believe, the only setting we haven't devoted a full episode to. So I guess they forced us our hand, and we've got to do this.
Got to do it.
I read Dragons of Autumn Twilight or whatever, which is just a hell of a name of a novel.
Dragons of Autumn Twilight and Dragons of Summer Flame, whatever the two were. I didn't read any after that. I know that there are many, many others, but those are the ones I read. I seemed to remember liking them. They had a cool wizard and his cool brother and some other cool people. I don't know. Dragonlance is cool. They ride on dragons. I have a big, fuzzy, vaguely pleasant gray, memory wherever that book is. So we'll have to reread it to brush up on Kryn.
Well, I started and tried to reread it a couple of years ago. It's just too bad for me. It's just it's just not good. That was my take. So, maybe the lawsuits resolved all those problems, swept behind us, and yes, we welcome Dragonlance to the 5e fold. Probably, right?
It makes sense. Like the things that have been popular in recent years, and the properties that can be adapted without a whole lot of additional rules. It definitely seems like Dragonlance falls precisely into that category. It seems like this is a clear next step for Wizards.
Yeah. There's only just one fatal flaw, which is it isn't very good. So
that's never stopped him before, Matt. So
never stopped it before.
Yeah,
but that's okay, and it hasn't stopped us before.
No.
We're not very good, but we're still going to try and help you out with some dungeon master problems today.
That's right.
How's that for a segue?
We've got some letters that have been piling up. They've been delivered via owl and steamboat and hand delivered, pushed through our mystical mailbox, and they've been piling up. We're going to answer some letters, though.
Yes.
What's happening?
And here's our first one, Rob. This one's from Paul. Love the podcast. It was exactly the type of D&D podcast I've been looking for, staying current with new episodes while working my way through old ones. Life got in the way the past 5 years. I taught my teenage daughters to play 1st, 2nd edition, and then they picked up 5e. They promptly abandoned me and started playing with their friends, but I finally gotten a group together to play every couple weeks.
I gotta say, Paul, if you taught your daughters to play with 2nd edition and they kept playing, you must have done something right, because let me tell you, it's compared to how most modern games function, 2nd edition is a little arcane. It's the kind of thing that made a lot of sense to grognards who grew up on war games, but It's game design has come a long way since the days of Thaco and 17
Rob's crazy.
different saving throws.
Second edition's fine. I think the great news is
I
that
love
your
second edition. I'm
daughters
just saying.
chose to abandon you, right? which means that they have truly taken the lesson of Dungeons and Dragons to heart, which is to play with your friends and not your dad.
That's right.
Sorry, Paul. It's heartbreaking. Here's Paul's a note. I agree with your statement about dexterity being overpowered in 5e. I particularly don't like how it is applied inconsistently and in a way that makes no logical sense. If you get to wear heavy armor, no matter how quick and dexterous you are, you not get to add your dexterity bonus to your armor class. So if someone swings a sword at you, you have the same chance of dodging it while wearing full plate if you have 18 or 8 dexterity. Full plate also gives disadvantage with stealth checks. However, if you have a fireball dropped on your head, the 18 dexterity fighter in full plate is suddenly an acrobatic master, dodging and rolling away to take half damage, yet earlier he couldn't dodge a simple sword attack. WTF. My fighter in full plate makes an acrobatic roll under the table to attack a foe on the far side. Add your dexterity bonus to that skill, but not if you're rolling away from a lightning bolt. Needs to be fixed. I like your suggestion that strength should apply. You are stronger, therefore you can move quicker while wearing bulky things. Add your strength bonus to dodge, an effect while wearing heavy armor, ? Paul also adds, regarding your fantasy reading list, I was surprised by the following omissions. Raymond E. Feist, the Rift War saga, Piers Anthony, the Xanth novel, and David Drake, Ranks of Bronze.
Two things. Well, one, first of all, I apologize for the omissions. Those are good suggestions, though I wasn't allowed to read Xanth novels as a kid because they were all too horny. They had too many naked women on the covers and so my parents were like, you can't read those.
And I wasn't allowed to read Xanth novels as an adult because I'm embarrassed by the covers in public. Now I'm just embarrassed.
Rift War is great.
I've never read Xanth. I don't know.
I had not heard of...
Yeah, I read that.
I had not heard of Ranks of Bronze, though, which is great because there are a lot of... The whole space time traveling Roman legion thing is cool, almost to the point of being a trope at this point, but that's not one that I'm familiar with. So, good suggestions. Rift War was not a deliberate omission. That's a great suggestion and a series that I have loved. The other two are also good suggestions, but I could not recommend them for obvious reasons. On the issue...
just one thing on Rift Wars before we go back. Sorry, it's not Rift Wars. The Rift War saga. I remember reading that as a kid and it having a huge impact on me. And I also, like Dragonlance, remember going back to it and being like, wow, this is really interesting. It's not very good. I can't make myself read it again. However, it holds a special place in my heart. And I remember reading that Raymond E. Feist, author of said magician and the Rift War saga, basically just like played D&D with his friends in college and was like, I'm going to write, this has inspired me to write a novel. And he wrote a very D&D novel. So there you go.
You love to see it. Regarding dexterity, I'm glad you agree. And lots of systems have done better than this. And lots of editions have done a better job with this. I think I mentioned in that episode, it used to be that you could add 1.5 times your strength to two-handed weapon attacks. I know why they removed that, but just because it simplifies the calculations, it weakens strength and further adds to the mechanical benefit of dexterity. Now, this doesn't necessarily matter a whole lot. There's a lot of things that are broken in 5th edition, but it does heavily benefit dexterity-based characters. Like, it does everything. Damage, armor class, reflex saving throws. It's just, unless your DM's a real stickler about an encumbrance, strength doesn't do a whole lot for you, which is not ideal.
Yeah, I had a character in one of my games that had like a full plate and a rapier, right? Which doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it does in that Dex is just so much more important for skills and initiative and reflex save or dexterity saving throws. I mean, it's like, oh man,
yeah.
Poor strength. I don't know if adding strength to armor class is the solution, like the one we gave, or the one Paul gave. It could work. I mean, I think it needs some sort of buff because it just makes so much more sense to have your bonus in dexterity.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it would take a pretty serious redesign. Not one that would be impossible, one that's been done in other games, but to change the way that certain attributes work with derived attributes, saving throws and whatever, to make strength a little bit more useful. And I don't know, maybe for the upcoming 5.5 edition they'll do it, but I'm not optimistic.
Yeah, this could be something you solve on the dungeon master and game design end. If you redistribute what triggers each secondary attribute, each saving throw, so that they're all at roughly equal parity in things that come up during gameplay, it's a little less of an issue. I mean, strength will still be worse than dexterity.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's got to go is dexterity to initiative. It's a controversial statement, but it's like, yeah, like why do I don't know, it's like monsters, like I don't know. I would just like to see initiative tied to something else. Maybe
I think it could work
maybe
as
just
wisdom.
No, I don't think it should be an
intuition.
attribute. I think it should be honestly, yeah, like its own thing that some classes get proficiency in and some don't. Or some get like half proficiency in. Like I think like rogues and rangers should have, things, but it could be a thing that you could just choose. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I don't like it tied to an attribute.
Well, and I think we should change initiative anyway. It's something I find trips up my players all the time because there's attack rolls and damage rolls and skill checks, and they're like, great, I get these. And then I'm like, okay, but also there's initiative, and it doesn't work like any of those. It's just dexterity. You don't add anything. And they're like, I don't add anything. I'm like, no, you don't add anything. And they can't, I don't add proficiency. No, you don't add a proficiency. It's just, but yeah.
Initiative could be a skill. It could be a straight check of one thing where it's not a separate thing. Obviously the great idea of Pathfinder is like, oh, initiative is whatever skill that is relevant at the time. I like that. I think a fun way to do it, when you say roll initiative, the dungeon master picks a attribute that applies.
Yeah.
Is it wisdom? Is it dexterity? Maybe it's sometimes constitution if you're on a tiring march. Who's staying awake the best? I don't know.
Nope. I like the way that Pathfinder does it. It has a lot more. Well, one, it's more dependent on the situation, and it's a lot more interesting and variable.
Paul also adds, as a PS, regarding the ecology of an owlbear, yes, they shit pellets. It's canon. And he says, love the pod, and I went to Dungeon 214 as suggested by Paul, and here's the quote. Like owls, owlbears tear their food into chunks and swallow the chunks whole. Inside the stomach, much of the prey is digested, but bones, fur, feathers, and insect shells are churned into pellets, regurgitated by the beast. These pellets are usually found near an owlbear's lair, and a good indicator of an owlbear's presence nearby.
Paul, thank you so much for this. I was delighted. This is from Dragon Magazine 214, 1995. I was sure that there was something on owlbear ecology somewhere, but I was just so damn tickled. So thank you for finding this. It is confirmed. Owlbears shit owlbear pellets. Their babies are carnivorous, and they learn to hunt. And yeah, it's got a whole bunch of stuff on the owlbear. So, it's also goofy as hell, but yeah.
My favorite thing about that quote is I feel like the author is just plagiarizing the dictionary, the encyclopedia entry for pellets, because it says insect shells. I'm like, owlbears are giant. Are they really eating insects? Maybe.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's copied directly from the encyclopedia.
That's owls. Owls are eating insects.
Thank you so much for writing in, Paul. And thank you for finding that Dragon Magazine and the owlbear ecology for us. I was truly delighted. All right. We have another letter from Jeremiah. Jeremiah writes, Dear Matt and Rob, I've had this idea running through my head for a while now, and after looking online, I can't find anything that someone has already made, so I thought I would ask you two. My idea is this. The PCs start at level 20, and as the adventure progresses, the PCs de-level, and the challenges continue to get harder. Do you know of any homebrewed adventures that use this concept? I understand that once they get down to a certain level, they're likely to die very easily, but this could force them to get extremely creative in their problem solving. Is this idea even a good one? Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this and hopefully to go about how to go about creating something like this. Sincerely, Noob DM.
Well, I have never heard someone do this, and you've cleverly, dangerously taken the very basic idea of the game. As you play the game, you get more powerful and more complicated and switched around. I think there are some other game systems that were kind of like this, but not D&D. D&D is you get more powerful. I don't know. Have you heard of this concept before, Rob?
I have never heard of this before. This is a great idea. I think that it is. Is it? I think it's terrific. I think that it's a clever subversion of all sorts of tropes. Do I think it would be fun to play?
Yeah, now there's the question.
I don't know. I do think that it's a really, really interesting idea, and I do think that it would be a really unique challenge to design and run.
Right. So here's the basic idea of the game is like as you level up, you get more powerful. In this game, you are getting less powerful, so you're asking player skill to improve, right? As character skill gets less, right? The challenges keep getting harder. You get less powerful. The only way to solve them is not by your character's abilities, but by your player's wits. So, like, that is an interesting idea. Can it work? I mean, players really level? See, that's the thing. Are players actually getting that much more better and clever at the game as they go on? A little bit.
But mostly they're just getting more powerful. They're getting more.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're getting more tools, which can sometimes make them better players. But most of the time they just get more hit points, more damage, more magical stuff. And so, I don't know, if you're going to Flowers for Algernon your players, you're going to have to really... Here's the thing. I think this is a really, really clever idea. I think that it could be... this reminds me of... What's that?
Getting older?
It reminds me of... There's a whole genre of board games or whatever like this, like what's it called? It's called Train, where you're just trying to like get the trains running, and then it turns out you're like sending people, sorry, spoiler alert for Train, but you're sending people to like concentration camps, and you've been spending this whole time trying to better optimize your train schedules. It's like a one-time, but like it's a twist, right? Like, and so
Jesus. Wait, why do you think of that?
Because it could be like a really interesting, I guess, like more of like a thought experiment type game rather than like this is a campaign that people want to play in. It could be like an opportunity to deconstruct the idea of D&D. That's what I'm thinking of. Sorry. That's why I thought of Train.
It's deconstructing a board game, right? Yes. Which is like, why are we building our settlers in Catan, and what is the point? Right. Okay. I get you now. Yes. Here's the deal. You got to answer two questions. One, you better have a pretty cool story hook as to why the players are de-leveling, and it's got to be awesome and cool and interesting and a neat mystery or story in and of itself. And two, I mean, here's the basic idea is like you're starting players off as incredibly complicated characters, as complicated as 5th E gets. And they all better be experienced players because, one of the nice things that 5e does okay at is like it's got a okay learning curve for most things. Like you don't have too many options at low levels, and you get more as you go up. So yeah, you gotta find a way to deal with those two things if you're gonna do this.
I mean, this is also a classic superhero trope, right? This is a type of superhero story where the superhero loses their powers. You got to find out, are they really a hero, or is it just the suit, or is it just the powers that make them, what they are? That's why I think, again, playing this is maybe like a short campaign or even a long one shot or something, rather than trying to make a whole extended campaign out of this would be better, because it'd be more about telling a very specific type of story than really the, I guess, challenge of de-leveling, which I cannot imagine a way to make very interesting or compelling. It just sounds like it would be very punishing.
It's a lot of bookkeeping too. It's harder to de-level than to level.
It's really hard to de-level because you're really not. Here's the thing, Matt, I don't think is sold on this, but Noob DM, I think this is a really interesting idea, and I think you should go for it. I think it would be very hard to do.
I think you should go for it because it will not affect me in the slightest, whether you do this or not. I'll be honest with you. You got to have a really cool plot, story, reason for this. You got to have player buy-in for this crazy idea. I mean, if they're experienced D&D players and you can sell it to them as like, no, I don't think anyone's ever run this type of campaign before. Yeah, maybe you can get some people on board with it. However, gosh, it's going to be a lot more work than normal to make it fun.
Yeah. The key thing is definitely you need to make sure that your players want to do this, because more than any other type of D&D, I think this is going to have the potential to be unfun. All of that being said,
fascinating idea.
I think conceptually it's really, really interesting. So I say run with it. Thanks for the very thought-provoking letter, Jeremiah, Noob DM.
All right. Well, we're de-leveling ourselves right now. Our empire is de-leveling. The planet's climate is de-leveling, and we've got another letter. This one's from Ariel. Ariel writes, "Hello, DMs Matt and Rob. I've been listening through your episodes in order. I'm currently not far from catching up, so I wanted to send you a message with a few questions and comments in hopes you'll discuss them soon. First, I wanted to tell you that I borrowed your parchment golem from an early episode and placed it in my world as a luxury delivery service for the upper crust of the city. The parchment golems were made to house small parcels and deliver messages before bursting into confetti and returning to the workshop to be reused in the postal service known as the Daily Papers. My PCs encountered these golems in a quest to stop bandits from gutting them and burning them and taking parcels from the rich district of town. I described them as origami Baymax, and my players had a lot of fun interacting with them."
This is so great. I don't remember what episode. It was an early episode where we designed.
It was like episode 8 or something.
Parchment Golem. That's one of my favorite monsters that we've designed. I've only used it a couple of times, but those were fun. I really liked those. I thought they had a lot of potential. So I'm really glad that you're getting use out of them. It makes me very happy.
Right. You can't beat your first couple albums. Eventually, you're just re-releasing live albums,
right.
and,
just
compilations.
doing the greatest hits over and over.
I've been DMing for a couple years, but this is the first long-term group I have had, so I've taken the opportunity to ask them my strengths and weaknesses so that I can improve. I've been playing to my strengths in world building and character building, but struggle with making challenging dungeons. I tend to make them too short out of fear of making a slog to get through. What would you consider a decent length for a typical dungeon? Should it take more than 1 3-4 hour session to get through a good dungeon? I have 4 newly 7th level players that are very well and probably overly equipped for most high challenges and haven't gone this high level before. Any input would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for making my long day of driving and grooming dogs a chance to improve my DM skills and make my table a fun and engaging place for my players. Sincerely, Ariel.
Ariel, this is a really good question, and it's an interesting question to me because I feel like this is a really good problem to have. So, Matt, maybe you can. I'm curious what you think, but I feel like, there's 2 questions here. 1, how do you make a compelling dungeon? And then 2, how long should they be? So first, there are so many, compared to basically anything else that you could pick for D&D, so many resources to draw from. So many people have created so many really, really good dungeons that if you're not strong in dungeon making, which by the way, I am not, just steal them. Just steal them. That's literally what they're for, and most of them can pretty easily be modified and dropped into your campaign. There are a lot of really strong dungeons for every edition that you can pick up and put down that are just masterfully well designed. So you don't have to bend yourself into knots trying to create one yourself.
And that's the thing with so much variety in dungeons. Rob, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think there's one length a dungeon needs to be. It depends on the purpose and the needs of the campaign, right? You've run Dungeons of the Mad Mage, which is a like 2-year-long dungeon, and I've run 1,000, 3-5-room dungeons. In fact, there's a whole book called 5-Room Dungeons that you can get for free by Googling it or subscribing to an email list. I don't think there's one right length for a dungeon.
I don't think so either. So the right length is what your players want. So I will tell you that my regular group gets tired of being in a dungeon after 2 or 3 sessions. And in Dungeon of the Mad Mage, I had to provide them with easy opportunities to return to the surface and do something else because they were getting visibly frustrated with dungeon crawling. I have had other groups that never wanted to leave the dungeon, that would just bull rush from room to room and found it endlessly delightful. So really, it's just about your players. I find that generally one that I find I feel like I'm losing.
Are your players playing Disco Elysium or Diablo? Right?
Diablo,
just ask yourself that question.
Right. I find that after maybe 3 or 4 sessions, if we're in the same dungeon, I'm starting to feel like what's going on here. So that's kind of what I try to maximally aim for. And that could be a pretty long dungeon, by the way. But I also I don't know. For me, the perfect length is either a short one, which you can finish in 1 session, or a big chunky one that you can finish in 2 to 3. I have run, like Matt said, I have run mega dungeons before, but you got to make sure that your players want to be in a mega dungeon. That being said, I agree with Matt. There is no perfect length. It's just what your players want. It's just what you want.
Yeah, there's really nothing wrong with the 5-room dungeon that can always be finished in a single session. Here's, I guess, the challenge for you if you want to take it is if you want a bigger dungeon, make sure you design it or steal it as one that can be easily left and returned to whenever the players want to, right? Maybe it's filled with undead or elementals, or maybe sort of like less reactive challenges that aren't going to like rebuild the whole dungeon. So your players, no pressure, right? They can go rest, they can go do their other quests whenever they want to, knowing that the next part of that dungeon is still there. And I think that's a good way to ease into introducing a medium-sized dungeon into your campaign.
Yeah, this is a good point. The length of the dungeon does depend somewhat on whether or not your players can leave. If they can't, then they're going to probably want to finish it sooner rather than later. If it's long, but they can go and rest and sell things and talk to people, then it can be a little bit longer. So that is something to bear in mind.
I know I brought this up last episode, but it's the illusion of like being able to control your destiny that affects our players a lot. If
Right.
they feel like something bad is going to happen if they leave in the middle of a dungeon, then they feel trapped, and then therefore it becomes a boring chore and slog. If they feel like, actually we can just kind of pause, put an X on the map, this is where we left off, and come back to this dungeon after we've rested and done other things whenever we feel like we need some more good loot or whatever this dungeon has to offer, then they'll enjoy it more.
Yeah. So I know that isn't like a precise answer, but a short, I think just a rule of thumb is it's always good. Yeah. If they're just 5 rooms, you can finish it in 1 session. More than 3 is maybe too long, but really it's up to you. It's up to your players. So, but definitely borrow. Definitely there's both free and paid resources by the dozens. People are really good at making dungeons.
Thousands.
There are lots of really good I mean, D&D has the community has a wealth of people who are really good at just dungeon design. So again, I'm not very good at this as a DM, but I don't have to be. I just steal and borrow from people who are better than me, and there's just tons, and a lot of them are really fun to run. So dig through the resources, grab what looks good, and just check with your players.
Yeah, if it sounds like dungeons are not the focus of your campaign, but players just love having a place where they can cut loose, show off their awesome skills that the game rewards them with. And again, build one that they can leave and come back to, and then your players can tell you what's a good length for a dungeon. If they leave it after one session, then maybe you should stick to more one-session dungeons more often than not. If they leave after two, maybe that's telling you something. Try and pick up some cues from your players by giving them a free to come, free to leave dungeon.
Yeah. Ariel also writes, P.S.
Yes.
I am rebooting my first ever homebrew world for my next campaign and would love love input on building out some of the bits I'm unsure about. Do you still do Campaign Doctor, Campaign Bible help? Thanks. Yes, we do.
Sure.
Maybe
we should make another call to send us another campaign summary. Like send us a 1-page or full campaign Bible, and we'll talk about them again.
Yes.
That could be a fun episode.
Yes, please do send it to us. Hopefully we'll be able to get to it in a timely manner. But yeah, absolutely. We would love to look at more campaigns, do more campaign Bible stuff. So send them my way. All right. Thank you so much, Ariel, for the letter. And I wish you luck with your dungeons. This next one is from Noah. Noah writes, "Hey, Rob and Matt, love your show, especially your willingness to speak truth to power regarding Wizards of the Coast. Feel like lots of D&D podcasters tend to tiptoe around this in hopes of, getting minis sent to them. Well, I would like free stuff. Don't think that I am too virtuous, but also I can't keep my big mouth shut, so too late for that. But I'm glad you appreciate it. Sometimes I get the sense that some of our listeners don't, so I'm glad that it doesn't bother you, because I have lots of opinions. We have lots of opinions.
Yes. Appreciate the sentiment. The way you phrased it makes us sound like we're like the protesters in St. Petersburg, like getting fucking shoved into a black site for protesting something. It's just a game, but thank you for the sentiment.
Thank you. Noah writes, continues, I've been percolating on a setting campaign idea for a while, and I can't quite tell whether it's... Sorry, did you bold this so that I wouldn't read the whole thing?
Yes, I did, Rob. It's a very long letter you put on you. Thank you, Noah, for this long letter, in case this is not...
So I do want to read this first part. Let me start that again, and then I'll skip to the bolded part.
Right.
I've been percolating on a setting campaign idea for a while, and I can't quite tell whether it's great or trash, offensive or just fine, when I'm reading too much into things. I've got some of Campaign Bible knocked out, but I'll spare you that and give you an overview with specificity on the potentially sticky parts. So there's a bunch here, but here's the first wrinkle. Some species are inherently magical while others are not. I think this creates some interesting tension, factions, etc., and the playing field is relatively leveled by the time the PCs arrive. But is the main concept racist? I definitely don't want to reinforce the idea of inherent racial traits, evil, intelligence, savagery, what have you. But does this count? You could be a dumb, lazy elf who happens to have an inherent magical spark, or the world's most thoughtful, compassionate half-orc who happens to be shit out of luck when it comes to inborn casting power. Is that fair? All right, so that's wrinkle one.
Okay. Let's unpack wrinkle one.
Okay.
So Noah's given us a world in which elves and gnomes, as sort of like species that have been around for longer, are inherently magical for reasons of the world, and other species are not. I'm just gonna say no, it's not. This is baked into the rules of the game, in that elves and I think most gnome species get a magic power, or at least they used to.
Right.
Some elves get a cantrip, you know. Obviously, there's so many races now and species now that doesn't really make gnomes and elves special. But among the basic races, it does.
So this is an interesting question. So I agree with Matt. I don't think that this is inherently racist. It depends, I think, on the society or the structures that you have placed around it. Is being able to do magic good? Is it powerful? Does it provide you with major material benefits? I mean, you could say yes, obviously, but maybe in this world that's not the case. Maybe the other species have technology or better social structures or something that evens the playing field. Or maybe there's a world where just because some species can do magic doesn't inherently benefit them in one way or another. In fact, maybe it could be a detriment. You could put it in the other direction. So I don't think that there's anything inherently racist about having some races, some species with inherent magical abilities.
Yeah, no, I mean, how it doesn't seem that different to me as Star Trek describing humans are like this, and Bajorans can use telepathy, right? They have a power that humans don't have, and that's okay. They're a different species, and unpacking those differences is an interesting fodder for storytelling. And then you also have to remember that, like, the player characters are exceptional, right? Noah goes on to detail that, like, other races can do magic now, but they've had to, basically, I don't know, come up with hacks and stuff like that, right? Whereas for elves and gnomes, it's more inherent, and like every elf and gnome can do it. But the PCs are exceptional. So the first level human wizard is going to be, still better than an average elf, or just as good, or something like that. And that's interesting, right? Maybe all the elf wizards look down on the human wizard. I don't think that's racist.
No,
that's interesting.
And I think, I mean, to me, this provides an interesting opportunity to make it not be racist, because there's nothing that says that there has to be racial animus over this magical distinction. That is, I think, a trap that a lot of writers and game designers fall into, is just assuming, and I'm not saying that you're doing this, no, I'm just saying that this is a thing that happens a lot, assuming that just because one species or one race has something and the others don't, that is going to produce some sort of segregation racist analog, but that does not actually have to be the case at all. And I think that designing a world wherein there is this inherent magical distinction, and you don't have to do fantasy racism, is an interesting challenge. And I think it would be an interesting world to play in.
Right. And Noah goes on to say, I think, so the second wrinkle is all species can now practice magic, and the existing power structures are trembling. The spell-barren species seek to create their own destiny in a more level playing field, while the spell-blessed species attempt to hold their privileges as they slip through their grasp.
Which I think that's an interesting premise. I think that it also provides you with some opportunities to, turn some of these ideas on their head, and also,
And I mean, okay, like, I don't see how this, well, we've talked about this before, but like having just kind of fantasy racism is a little dumb and tiring and not great. But I think this also doesn't really connect with any, that at least I can see from my limited perspective here, any sort of real world analogs, right? This is, so that's not something you have to worry about. And I think the way you're putting it up, right, where you could put out the spell blessed as an analog for Noah goes on to say as an analog for old money, and
See,
basically
sorry, I hadn't gotten to this, but that already is a better frame, because you can have all sorts. That's a cultural distinction. I've been I've been watching The Gilded Age, which is all about the old money of New York getting upset about the new money, like the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and whatever, which is funny because now they're old money, and which tells you what you need to know about money, which is that
sometimes it gets old.
It doesn't matter if it's old or new. What matters is that it's money. Anyway, that's a much more like cultural distinction, and the spell-blessed hanging on to their magical privilege isn't a racism story. It's a class story, or it's a culture story. It's a society story. And then you can avoid all that weird icky stuff about doing a fantasy racism and just make it about the new folks the old folks trying to keep the new folks from rising up.
Yeah, and I mean, you can, this is also a divide in approach to magic, right? Mm-hmm. Some believe magic should be restricted to the few. And maybe they have some good points in that magic has some destructive effects, right? And then others believe that everyone should use magic, but maybe they're chewing up magical resources or the environment or something like that. And it's an approach, a conflict over ideology, and not just the elves hate humans and dwarves hate orcs or something, which is
it's a distinction over their approach. Noah goes on to describe the Spellbearer and the new races as tech bro, disrupty industrialist, which I like a lot. I like the distinction between the stodgy, ostensibly conservationist, conservative, spell blessed, the original races, and these disruptor newcomers. They both suck, and that's how you know you've got a good concept, is when both sides are equally obnoxious, and then you make your players choose, and then they get really upset about that. They got to choose between two bad sides. That's the sign of a good plot right there.
Yes. Rob, a very kind DM who loves just let the players feel empowered and have fun.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Empowered to choose between two worse options. That's the best way to DM.
Yeah, I love an idea of like startup tech bro wizard conclaves. That seems super annoying. And then you put those opposed to your stereotypes from the Gilded Age of the noblesse oblige attitude.
Yes.
Yeah, they both suck.
That's right. You got sneering socialites versus
I say.
Yes, that's right. On the one hand, you've got your Joe Manchins, on the other hand, you've got your Elon Musks, and the players are stuck between them, and it's delightful. Yeah, I think this is a good concept. I think there's a lot going here. I'm interested to see how it progresses. Yeah. Give us a follow-up, Noah.
And Noah, thank you for this letter. And I think it's illustrative of the fact that I want to remind everyone of is that as Dungeon Masters, we can change these types of things for the world without it really having any effect on like player character creation or anything like that. Because again, the player characters are special.
Yes.
You want to be a spell baron sorcerer. You're some dwarf who has made a deal that has somehow got them, they injected, Captain America style, a bunch of pixie juice into their veins, and it's the super sorcerer serum, and they're a sorcerer now, right? They may be the only dwarf sorcerer, but that's fine.
That's fine.
And that's
allowed.
Interesting.
They're PCs. They can be special. Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. Yeah, don't let your world design inhibit player choice, I guess, within reason. I shouldn't say things like that because then we're going to get some kind of letter about,
Yeah. Bob, stop making blanket statements that you're going to force me to defend on Twitter.
Oh, my God. Thank you for writing in, Noah. This is a really interesting letter, and I think you're on the right track. Best of luck.
Here's our next letter. It's from Arash. Arash writes, "Aloha, Matt and Rob.
Aloha.
Longtime listener of the show. I appreciate your thoughtful views and find them very refreshing at a time like this. Anyway, I'm running my own Wildemount campaign.
I think it's Wildemount. We've been corrected on this a bunch of times.
Yeah,
it looks like Wildemount to me, but I think it's just Wildemount. And I think it's just got an extra E because Matt Mercer thought it looked cool. So just because the way that English works, it wouldn't be pronounced that way. We'll say it Wildemount.
Wildmount. And Rob has brought up correctly, this is the Matt Mercer campaign setting, of which, by the time this episode is a week old, there will be a new edition of the Tal'Dorei campaign setting.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Anyway, I'm running my own Wildmount campaign, and Cult of Tiamat is an antagonist in my campaign. I know there's some interesting material regarding this in Tyranny of Dragons. However, it's a bit Forgotten Realms specific, and there are some elements of the cult that I require which aren't included. I know where the cult is located, and I know its leaders, but what are some other important elements that I need to include? I have some other specifics, but I would like to know what you think are the essentials. Thanks again, Arash.
This is a really interesting question to me for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's interesting to think about, like, what does a cult need? But two, Tiamat is so tied to Forgotten Realms, but doesn't have to be. And so I actually think this is really interesting. What would Tiamat, or what could Tiamat be like independent of that whole sort of, mythology that's, related to the cosmos of the Forgotten Realms? There's like nothing about a chaos dragon that's unique to that. So I think this is really interesting, and you have an opportunity here to make Tiamat even more threatening and more interesting. So I don't know, what sort of things does a cult need?
When I think of the cult of Tiamat, I think of the fact that Tiamat is like multiple aspects of evil combined into one, and that in some interpretations of Tiamat, her own heads often argue with each other, which, if you think about it, maybe that's silly, but on the other hand, that feels like very mythological and godlike.
It does make sense for like a deity, maybe, to like a animal with arguing heads, kind of weird. But if it's a deity, you can sort of see that as maybe aspects of itself in theological conflict or about the fate of the world. So if it were me, yeah,
I would want different leaders with different perspectives.
Yes.
That are like are in some way, as below, so above. In this case, with Tiamat, recreating that dynamic on the material plane,
and
vying for control and being completely evil to one another.
Yes, and you can theme these branches or heads of the dragon to match Tiamat's heads, different powers, different elemental affinities, that sort of thing. But yeah, I would have a rather than one cult head, I would have several, and each of them with close but distinct beliefs that put them in conflict with each other. It's also,
is the Hydra holy to Tiamat? That would be cool. Anyway, sorry,
I don't know. It should be, though. That would be awesome. I think we should make that, feel free to borrow that, Rush. That would be cool. The Hydra does seem like it should be. Well, I'm going to have to look it up. Anyway, the other thing about Tiamat, and this is an issue that I have with a lot of chaotic evil deities, is it's not clear what the end goal is, what sort of, I can understand lawful evil and even neutral evil a little bit better, but chaotic evil just seems like, I don't know, destroy the world. That doesn't seem like a very comprehensible end goal, nor a very achievable one.
I thought Tiamat was lawful evil, but I feel like I'm looking it up now, and apparently her alignment has changed several times. So
Isn't she chaotic evil now?
I'm not sure now.
Sorry.
I looked up my old 3rd edition stuff, and she was lawful evil then. So
okay.
But I'm seeing another thing that says she's chaotic evil, which seems very chaotic evil. She could be whatever you want.
Oh, it says both on 5th edition. She's sometimes lawful evil and sometimes chaotic evil, which is very chaotic.
Okay. All right.
Well, then never mind. You can do whatever you want then.
Yeah. You think they'd split the difference by now?
Anyway, make her neutral evil. Yeah. That being said, sorry. So the other thing that I think that a lot of cults, as written in D&D canon, sometimes don't include is goals. And so give your cult leaders, give your cult followers and beliefs, but also give them distinct achievable goals. They want something to affect some end. It doesn't have to be necessarily super comprehensible. You know, it could be an element of faith, but it should be, they should have clear goals. It shouldn't just be cause chaos and do violence, you know.
So, okay, going to Eberron, right? In Eberron, Tiamat is one of the overlords, one of the
one of the
demons,
demon overlords, yeah.
Right, bound in the material plane, but still able to like slowly influence the world. And they have agents, the Lords of Dust, throughout the material plane, working on schemes that last millennia. And she is bound in Argonessin, in the a continent that's ruled basically, it's Dragonland, right? Not to be confused with Dragonlance. And I think her goal should be kind of like an Eberron, if I was making a cult of Tiamat, which is to corrupt other things. Like, Tiamat has 5 heads because she has succeeded in corrupting and making evil 5 types of dragons. She would like to add other creatures and other types of dragons to those 5 heads, right? And, we have no idea what a god actually looks like. Maybe. Obviously, they can send avatars and stuff. This is just a metaphor. And she would love to add, the city of Waterdeep as one of her heads.
Right.
And
right.
gold dragons and the Order of Holy Wizards or whatever. These things can all become another head of Tiamat, right? And right now she's only got 5, and she treasures those 5, but she wants more heads.
I like that. I think that's got a lot of potential. So, I think I like this because I think Tiamat is the kind of chaotic, primordial, evil dragon deity that can easily be adapted to just about any other setting. And so, really, Arash, you can do anything you want with this. So, I think if you know where the cult is located, its leaders, its membership, figure out its goals, figure out its beliefs, figure out sort of what resources it has, and then I think you're good to go.
Right. If you're looking for advice on just like planning, make 3 plans, right? They could come from different parts of the cult. One is short term and will happen soon. One is medium term and is something maybe the players can stop and interfere with. And another is like the big one.
Right. What's the
big boy that will, I don't know, it will turn, it's the cool thing that will turn everyone evil.
Yes.
Through a magic
right.
evil ray.
It's the plan to make everyone in the world a vampire from Blade 2. It's the super evil plan. It's the blot out the sun plan. It's the big boy.
Didn't think that one through. And neither did the cult of Tiamat. They wanted to give everyone 5 heads, and everyone's like, well, that doesn't really seem like it's going to change things much. We all had 5 heads. Probably just tip over, Most of us don't have 4 legs. Well, Mama Tiamat says 5 heads. I guess we're going to do it.
Everybody's got to have 5 heads. Thank you, Arash. This was a really interesting letter, so I hope it was helpful. All right. Our last letter comes from Jim. Jim writes, Dear DMs, recently I started DMing online for a small group of friends. I'm running Fandelver because it's fine, and we're all new, so we don't know any better. Hey, that's great. That's 100%. Go for it. Since we're all adults with jobs, we were forced to limit our sessions to a paltry 60 minutes once a week. At first, I was miffed by this, thinking the sessions would feel either too rushed or too slow. Anyway, to the point, in a recent session, my lackluster improv created a plot hole, and my players started poking at it, think there was a mystery where there was not. Because our sessions are so short, I was able to temporarily deflect them. Once I had time to ponder it, I came up easily with an answer to the plot hole I'd created that would link it to one of the side quests. So it worked out perfectly because I can turn my mistake into a beat where the players get to feel smart for uncovering a conspiracy. I never would have thought of this in the moment, only in the cooler and reflective atmosphere of the post-session think dump. So finally, my question is, what do you think of short sessions? Thanks for all you do. You help newcomers like me shave years off of our DM training time with your practical advice. Jim.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Thank you, Jim. I don't know that you need our advice. Sounds like you're doing a great job. Regarding short sessions, I've never gone as short as 60 minutes deliberately. That being said, I've had a lot more 1.5 and 2 hour sessions in the last couple of years than I have in my entire life. And you know what? That's usually enough to get a lot of gaming in, truth be told. I like longer sessions, but it's been a pandemic, and especially on Zoom, it is hard to maintain anyone's attention, including mine, for longer than an hour.
With my students at school, because of other restrictions on buildings and time for clubs and stuff, our sessions for the past, since January, have only been 50 minutes. I can't say that I like it. My thoughts on short sessions are not great. It's just the problem is, right, you've got to lose 10 minutes at the beginning and 5 minutes at the end, kind of, right? And even if you don't lose that amount of time, things are slower at the beginning, right? And I think Rob has a fair point. I think there's a nice little critical mass at 90 minutes where that's like a bare minimum. But I'm glad you're able to pull it off, but 60 minutes is still far too short for me. Like the last 3 weeks, we've gone through something that I would have liked to have gone through in one session, right? Which makes sense because, a session in my mind is 3 hours. But you play with the time that God has given you, so.
That's right. I mean, the real answer is if it works, it works. I think 3 hours is the optimal session length. Like I said, especially in terms of actual playtime, there have been definitely several, we were sitting around for 2.5 hours or whatever, but we only played for an hour and a half. So I guess that's sort of the thing, Jim, is are you only with each other for 60 minutes? Because that's real tight, because you got to have time to chat and unwind, and then your playtime gets really compressed. But if you've got the time, but the actual session time is only an hour, that's enough to get something done. But like Matt said, if it were 50 minutes or 60 minutes, that's really tight. But if you can make it work as a DM, then go for it.
After I made it through that 3-session arc, I was like, all right, I gotta, make sure I plan differently, where that when we show up, the things that happen will reach some sort of interesting conclusion, right? This is actually where I think long dungeons are a bad idea, right? Because the 3 sessions I ran were a 5-room dungeon.
No wonder you were frustrated if that took.
Do not want to do a 5-room dungeon over 3 weeks. I will kill myself. I don't like it. So
the answer is Matt doesn't like short sessions. Rob thinks they're okay conditionally. I think that either way,
you got to plan for them is what I'm saying. You got to think in terms of 60-minute blocks. And if you're doing that, you'll be better off.
But it sounds like you're making it work. So if your players like it and it gives you the chance to recover and think on your feet, then go for it. Especially if at the very least, if you're consistent, then that's better than nothing.
Absolutely. Thanks for the letter, Jim.
Thanks for the letter, Jim. All right, everybody. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for being being here with us on this journey of dungeon mastering. As always, please rate and review, subscribe, smash that like button.
And of course, if you want your letter to be read by us and maybe even answered by us, the address is dmofnone@gmail.com.
That's right. Send us your thoughts. As always, as well, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep rolling them dice.
With heads uncovered, swear we all to bear it onward till we fall. Come dungeons dark or gallows grim, this song shall be our parting hymn. Raise the scarlet standard. standing high, beneath its foes we'll live and die. Though cowards cringe and traitors sneer, we'll keep the red flag flying here.